8:37 on the Grandy Group. It is Brian Neiman and Fred Grandy.
We've had a couple of members of Congress, David Vitter, talking about John Boehner getting a few lessons in public finance, how to cut back. But for personal finance, the guy we always turn to, Matt Heimer, the Deputy Editor of SmartMoney magazine. He joins us this morning. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
And, of course, now a resident of Chicago.
Chicago!
Oh, that's right, my friend.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of play softball with huge grapefruit-sized softballs.
Okay, great. You're already adapting, I see.
Yes, I am.
You got a story in Smart Money that's interesting because when we were looking at the mortgage catastrophe that precipitated the big crisis of 2008, the word you heard all the time was McMansion, people buying more home than they can afford. But apparently, in the aftermath, they found at least a partial solution in how to meet their mortgage payments. What exactly is that?
Well, it's sort of the Charles Dickens solution. You basically become someone who runs a boarding house. If for some reason you decided you needed a house with 8 bedrooms, and now you're having a hard time making the mortgage payment, why not rent out a few of those bedrooms to lodgers, basically, to people who are renting them on a monthly basis, as a place to live while they get through their own troubles.
Well, no, but wait a minute. Aren't there zoning laws that don't necessarily allow you to do that any place you want to?
Well, it depends. A lot of condo associations make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen, but especially in some of these suburban boom areas in Florida or out in Las Vegas or in California where there was just really fast construction, they never really got around to writing those laws. And even now, you're seeing a little bit of a backlash, but even now the backlash is stuff that still allows this to happen. It's sort of like, well, make sure you do a background check or a credit check on these guys. Stuff a good landlord would do anyway. So yeah, it's a little bit of a free-for-all. Now, granted, we don't have numbers that shows exactly how common this is, but, pretty much if you go on Craigslist in any hard-hit real estate crash part of the country, you are going to find advertisements for this. Essentially, will you be my, paid roommate?
Right. I have to tell you that, even if you're not having a recession, this is a good way to make money. About 10 years ago, one of my friends bought a house in Virginia. We had a big, nice pool in the backyard, and he was a single guy. And, instead of making the payments for, his mortgage of $2,000 a month or whatever it was, he asked 4 of us to move in, essentially. So it was 4 guys living in a nice house in Fairfax with a pool in the backyard. And we all had girlfriends at the time.
Yeah.
And so there
was the best years of his life,
really,
of course.
They were.
That's what he's getting to.
It was fantastic. But essentially, he didn't pay the mortgage. We paid his mortgage for him, and he enjoyed it because we were his friends. But the funny part about it is that we all pretty much had girlfriends or were dating at the time, so there were girls constantly going in and out of the house. And one of the neighbors down the street finally came up to me and said, "What the heck is going on in that house? You guys run."
One of Brian's roommates was a young fellow named Charlie Sheen.
That's right.
Who apparently learned a few tricks from young Neiman.
He thought we were running a brothel.
That's right. It sounds a little bit like an episode of Three's Company. It's got a little bit of that vibe. But I think what's a lot of us, of course, and this same went for me too. Just out of school, getting started in my 20s. People are used to living the roommate life.
Right.
I think what's a little bit different about this wrinkle is you're seeing people who, I think for most Americans, buying a house is kind of a big adulthood move. It's a sign of your independence and your financial arrival. So if you're, say, 50, like some of the people we interviewed for this story, and you bought this house several years ago, and now times are tough, and you are sort of turning back the clock to your 20s, living like you're a recent college grad again, there's a little bit of a psychological come down.
Yes.
A little bit? My God.
Well, yeah, I was actually just imagining like Fred and Mrs. Fred taking in like two or three roomies but what it comes down to is, ultimately, if that come down doesn't hurt your feelings, a lot of people we talk to, they said, I'm grateful to have the company, I'm grateful to have the space filled. If there are families that are going through financial hard times to begin with, I think they're glad to have, some more friends to commiserate with, and I think a lot of people see there's a lot of upside.
Yeah, I'm not one of those people, but maybe that's just me. Hey, before we let you go, you've got another piece that caught my eye because essentially it's about hospitals buying up doctors and apparently saying goodbye to the family doctor. My brother, as I think I may have told you, had a spinal cord injury about 6 years ago. Has been in a wheelchair. Has had a series of surgeries, and most recently I was talking to his wife because he had a major internal problem had to be fixed, and she said, "Well, it turned out all right because the hospitalist took care of him." I said, "Hospitalist, what's that?" She said, "That's the guy hired by the hospital to work at the hospital to do the things his internist told him to do. So now he has an internist and a hospitalist because the internist can't go to the hospital and the hospital can't go to the office. Is this what we're talking about in your article?
It's certainly part of it. You know, one of the big complaints that anybody who's had a chronic health problem or a serious injury or anything like that has is that when they pass sort of beyond the hospital doors, the coordination of their care becomes a problem. You know, the internist who sees you outside the hospital all of a sudden doesn't have influence or access to you the way he or she would if he were a hospital employee. So as hospitals are buying up the doctors, one of the advantages for patients potentially is that you'd have someone like a hospitalist whose job it is to coordinate all your care. Or if you didn't actually have someone in that specific role, just the fact that all the doctors were under the same corporate umbrella would mean that information would be shared more easily, there'd be less of a risk of mistakes, you wouldn't be getting duplicate unnecessary tests. You know, the idea is that ultimately, you know, your care would be better and your costs would go down. In this transitional time, when the hospitals are buying the doctors, it's a little more complicated and a little more fraught. The main reason that a lot of doctors are selling their practices, I should say, to hospitals is that they're just really having a hard time cutting it financially. Medicare payments, you know, have not kept up with inflation, even though they've grown as a whole.
Yes.
And so you've seen a lot of doctors who just really feel a pinch, and they're eager to essentially stop being small business people and start being employees of a big business, namely a hospital. But for patients, that can still be kind of jarring. I mean, in some cases, this may mean, you know, if you're used to seeing a whole network of doctors that you chose in their independent practices, you may not have that same range of choice once you are part of a hospital group.
And it
so
seems
that
the
hospital guys, you know, are people you wind up liking and trusting.
But the net medical result is that the family doctor is pretty much an endangered species.
That's right. The family doctors, in many cases, if there's a dominant hospital wherever they are practicing, they're under increasing pressure to join up. You know, they see the perks of possibly more job security and more stable income. They just sort of face the competitive issues of being up against a big business that can advertise and market its services and kind of squeeze them out. So it becomes a if you can't beat them, join them situation for a lot of physicians.
All right, Matt. Good stuff. Thank you as always.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Guys.
Matt Heimer, Smart.